And welcome everybody to our live stream this afternoon. It's lovely to have Joe Vandermeer here with me from the Swedenborg Centre in Sydney. Very much looking forward to talking to Joe, hearing about his journey, the work that he's doing up in Sydney, and also talking to us this afternoon about sacred geometry. So there's lots going on. I would say if you've got any questions for Joe and you're watching this live, feel free to drop something in the chat. I'm very happy to pass questions along to Joe as they come up. And if you're watching this as a recording after the event, again, put a question in the comments, and I'll forward that on to Joe, and we'll work out an answer one way or another. But welcome, Joe. And sorry, I forgot your name sitting up the back. Up Rob. With Joe. Rob. Hi, Rob. Lovely to have you along with us. Of course, you're in the special privilege that you can ask Joe a question from where you are. So it's a nice situation of a front row seat. But Joe, welcome. Lovely to have you with us, mate.
Thanks, Dave, for inviting me.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I wonder if you can tell us, first of all, a bit about your work at the Swedenborg Centre, what it involves, how long you've been there, what you do.
Yeah, this job is really managing a number of events and conversations with people. So the idea is that there is someone who can represent Swedenborg's material, Swedenborg's writings, Swedenborg's teachings, Swedenborg's philosophy of spiritual life, and allow people to just come with questions, interests, curiosity, coming from maybe other avenues, like other spiritual philosophies or a spiritual way of life, or other organizations, or just questions in life, and come here and have a cup of tea and talk about their stuff. And then I run events to present Swedenborg a bit more formally, and related material. So it's kind of Swedenborg and collateral, as we call it.
Okay.
The people that write about Swedenborg. And so we do a read and discuss kind of approach in most of those sessions, 2-hour events. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they're weekly, fortnightly, monthly? How often do you run those?
A lot of events are weekly. For example, we have a Swedenborg reading group on Wednesday mornings, where anybody can just join in at any time to read a passage of Swedenborg, and we tend to read a paragraph at a time, and then out of that pause maybe 15 minutes of exploration. And on Fridays we run Dr. Groves. I've just finished one today, Dr. Groves reading. He's the man that introduced me to Swedenborg in the first place, and he has a lot to say about Swedenborg. So, and I was also running some Maurice Nicoll. He's a psychologist who was around in the 1930s, 40s, who followed Gurdjieff, but he also had a deep interest in Swedenborg, and that's quite rare for people to span several silos of spiritual interest, very thoroughly. And that's become a lot more public lately because of the work of somebody in the US who's researching that. And so I put on some sessions recently around the work of Maurice Nicoll, but events are always changing. If the numbers drop off and the interest peters out, then I stop those events and start something else.
So look, I'll mention to anybody who's watching, we've got contact details for Joe. I think we put a phone number, we put a website address in the description to the video. So if you want to get in touch with Joe and anything that's going on in Sydney, then have a look at the video description. I had a question I was going to ask you and it's just slipped my mind. How long have you been doing it? How long have you been involved in the Swedenborg Centre, Joe?
I've been here for about 9 years in this job, but I've been interested in Swedenborg since 1987. So how long was that?
Quite a while.
Quite a while ago.
Almost 40 years, isn't it?
40 years, yeah.
Almost.
But I must say, to be fair, that although I'd heard of Swedenborg, and I had heard from Philip Groves that he's an important figure to study seriously, because of the amount of detail that Swedenborg brings and the integrity of the things that he brings. It took me a long time to become familiar with Swedenborg as a companion. You know, I read Swedenborg, but I found it philosophical, intellectual, dry, truths and goods. You know, what are they? The older language didn't really speak to me very well, so it took me over 10 years to really find Swedenborg as a trusted source and as a companion that I would go to look up questions and answers and teachings. So it took a while.
And what was the process that led you down that road?
I think that as they say in the logopraxis world, you know, the material worked on me. The writing was studying me. You know, the teachings that Swedenborg has land on the natural mind that I started out with, my natural thoughts, my normal kind of way of processing every bit of information. And it didn't go all that deep. It had to set roots, and that took a while. So I might read a passage in the beginning, and then after a few months I would think, well, that actually there's more to it than what I thought. And so gradually I would change in response to taking on board certain of Swedenborg's statements, like, for example, that God is the only being that exists in some sense, and everything else is an appearance of God's manifestations. That is a very difficult truth to digest. That everything is in flux, that I don't even have my own thoughts and feelings to a great degree. I grew up thinking that everything was mine, right? And all that kind of stuff. It gradually takes, bit by bit, is chipping away at the notion that may not be the way to interpret it anymore. And it took a long time for me to accept those statements as and to agree with them internally. And that, of course, changes the way I live my life. So that is the end result. But that takes a long time, that journey.
And what led you specifically to working with the Swedenborg Centre? You're full-time, aren't you, I think, essentially, working with Swedenborg Centre?
I am full-time, yes. Some weeks 7 days a week, some weeks 6 days a week, and some weeks 5. Usually 5, but I'm trying to get that down to 4, and sometimes sneak in a 3-day week, which is very rare. But it's a pretty full-on job, but I love it very much, and it means a lot to me, because in a way I can now begin to share some of the things that I've learned over the years, and also to find ways that I can communicate that without facing all the jargon and the difficulties of accepting what something that Swedenborg says, accepting the way he's saying it. So I'm very pleased that there are new translations that make it easier to understand what he's saying. I'm also very pleased that there is a chatbot and artificial intelligence that helps to summarize things in a very quick way that might give me a clue. I'm not relying on AI to give me the whole kit and caboodle and all the detail, because I go to the source for that, and I don't need to have it blur the lens of what that detail is about. But if I want to get a handle on something, a general idea of what it's discussing, or why it says this, or whether he says anything at all about certain things, or what might he have said about something new that he didn't know about at the time, there's often very good, useful connections there in that world. So I'm very much an IT person by training. I've worked in the IT industry for 35 years in the corporate world. So for me, IT is a tool that can be used, if it's used wisely, to help some of this stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that sort of strikes me is talk about all of that. So 5 years ago, we had the pandemic. We were facing lockdown and that sort of thing. I know for us, we went online. We were the only way we could have services. It's true of a lot of churches and spiritual groups and community groups. We had to move across to Zoom or Google Meet, those sorts of technologies. Are you doing a lot of work still on like virtual meetings? Are you seeing people turning up face to face at the centre?
Both are true. We had, because I have been involved with the Swedenborg Association, which is a separate organisation but has similar objectives of engaging Swedenborg type material and relating it to life, all sorts of aspects of life. So there's an overlap there. I was involved with that organisation long before I got this job. And as a group, the Swedenborg Association decided to put some high-tech gear, good sound equipment, good presentation equipment, good streaming equipment into the church, which is the venue that we often use for a lot of events. Okay. Before COVID was even on the radar, and that happened just before COVID. So we were well prepared, and it was kind of almost providential that we were in the right place with the right gear at the right time, and that became a big turning point for people had been members who are living remotely in Australia and said, you say you're an Australian organisation, but you don't serve anything outside of the local Sydney vicinity, and that sort of answered that because anybody can join from anywhere, and they did. We had people from Germany, UK, US, New Zealand. I had sessions that ran with people from just about everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite possible we've got people watching from some of those far-flung places even now, and it just gives me opportunity. If you are watching from from wherever you are, please do say hi. Pop something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So, and I think something that I'm aware of, people from other countries often don't realise the distances we're dealing with in Australia. And yes, Swedenborg Association of Australia is a national organisation in a country that takes several days to drive across. So, it makes sense that an organisation like the Swedenborg Association is using those technologies to bring people together across the country. What about AI?
Yeah, that's right.
What about AI? Because I mean, that's a much more recent. I mean, it's been developing for decades, of course, but it's really come to the fore in the last, couple of years in particular. Are you finding that's having a big impact on what you're doing?
It's certainly having an impact, because one of the problems that I face is that I had an employee here one day a week. In the past, predecessors of mine had employees multiple days a week, because before the internet, and not many people would remember those days, I suppose, before the internet, there was a world of books and book selling, and everything was done by post and so on, and it was very laborious. So you needed people on the ground to do all that stuff, to lick the stamps and keep the spreadsheets of contacts and so on. Well, AI actually, not just AI, but the fact that we've now got an online world which is more accessible to people. It's simpler to get online, to connect with each other using, say, Zoom and Ripstream and all these other services. There is so much more material now online, everything from Wikipedia to Google and all the other resources we have. And now we've got AI, which actually is a way of sort of drawing together a lot of research in a very quick, summary form. So you can get access to material much quicker. So not having so many people on the ground here to help, my colleague moved down to Victoria about a year ago or so, and so that's making it making the job more reliant on my presence and my own time and resources. AI has helped me a lot because if I want to research something or find an article to write or something to present or an idea to float on in one of the meetings, then that's very easy to do. I can just pose a question. It comes up with a whole lot of suggestions. I use those suggestions as starting points, a bit like building blocks. I might discard some of it, and I know that it's not always reliable. So yeah, so it's helped me a lot to fast track and be a bit more productive with material that I want to produce. It doesn't help do the books. You know, that's the admin side of the job is still there. You know, we are looking for an assistant director because I'm not going to be in this job forever. So if anybody is interested in that, then,
send in your CV.
Certainly approach. Send a CV.
I'll say good morning to Wayne, who's joined us from the UK. Lovely to have you with us, mate. It's good.
Hi, Wayne.
Well, look, Joe, you're going to tell us about sacred geometry, so I think I'm going to give you the floor now and see what you've got to share with us. I know there's a number of people who are watching who are very keen to hear what you've got to say, so go for your life.
Okay. I'm interested in a number of different fields or subjects, and they're usually to do with artistic expression of some kind or another. Although I find the IT world is also an interesting way to engage with spiritual material, believe it or not. But I found that in more than anything that I've done, music and geometry are two forms that kind of relate to me in a way that maths relates to mathematicians. It's their connection or bridge between form, the world of form, the way that Plato used to think of it as, and the world of manifestation, which is the world we're all surrounded by every day. You know, the stuff we eat, the stuff we do, the stuff we see, the stuff we know. And so I find geometry a very good bridge for thinking more abstractly about truths. And I've also enjoyed the orderliness of certain kind of geometrical artistic expressions. And I'm not the only one, because apparently the Sufis all the way back from about 800 or 900 AD in Baghdad were exploring a similar sort of topic and coming up with all sorts of ways to express their philosophical teachings in practical ways. And they were very beautiful expressions, but they did have a philosophy that accompanied that. And that's what I'm interested in very much. So it has a pleasing artistic output, which I'll show you in a second, as well as a philosophical basis, which I'm very interested in. And I find that music has the same kind of potential. And I just found a photograph of me doing a music class in 1988, giving similar sort of material as I'm doing now. So, I've been at it for a long time.
A long-standing interest.
Yeah, that's right. Because it speaks to me, you know, and when something speaks to you, like music or artistic expression, and it's meaningful to you, it stays with you and it grows, you know. And it helps you grow too.
I mean,
so can I?
They do often say there's a link between music and maths, and it's certainly been true in my experience as well. I trained as a musician, as you know, Joe, but I also found maths quite interesting as well in high school. So.
Well, this is what I've been trying to find all my life, adult life, since I was a teen, I suppose. I started taking an interest in this, that I found a connection between maths, music, art, and the art form is geometrical to some degree. So I find that there's a big connection, and it speaks to me of spiritual principles. It seems like the world is embedded or embodied with spiritual principles, and they often come out the most clearly through geometric forms, things that are of beauty. Musical expression is another one, poetic, rhyme and meaning. Yeah, I think these things really speak to me. And there was a guy called Paul Erdős, who was a Hungarian mathematician, and he was a man who really loved numbers. He was collaborating with all these mathematicians around the world. And the Paul Erdős number, the Erdős number in the mathematical world, is very highly prized. That if you work with him on a paper to solve a particular theorem, you got the number 1. If you had a Paul Erdős number of 1, that was like you were receiving gold. Whereas if you're collaborating with someone who collaborated with someone with Paul Erdős, you were collaborating with someone else, so second hand, if you like, you got Erdős number 2. And so it's a highly prized number of degrees of separation from Paul Erdős as the central. And he collaborated with more mathematicians than anybody in his life. And he used to say that when he got a certain idea in his head mathematically, and he found it very, very beautiful and coherent and a nice, beautiful, simple expression of something true, he would say that's straight from the book.
Okay,
meaning somewhere else, like this is not, we're not making this up. This is coming to us from some higher source, I like that expression.
Very nice, straight from the book.
Well, I'll share a couple of screens.
Yep.
Is that a
go for it
to do? Yep. All right. So I need to first of all start my presentation. I'm not going to show you every slide from this presentation, otherwise we'll be here for a long time. But this material has been prepared for a number of different opportunities. One will be a retreat that's being held in Queensland in January. Another might be a talk that Rob will probably get me to do. So there will be other opportunities to see this material, but I'm just going to sort of go through it and pick on the things that might be relevant here within the time that we've
wonderful.
got. So let me go to presenter view.
Oh, no.
All right. So first of all, sacred geometry. Why am I interested in sacred geometry? I like to usually start exploring something new with definitions. So I ask myself, what's sacred about it? What is sacred in the first place? And then define geometry. So if this had been a bigger group interactively, I might have asked for people's own definitions on what they think it might be. So something that is sacred is what makes things whole. It has the effect of evoking a reverence and a feeling, holiness, something set apart for a special purpose. And it's usually associated with something religious, but doesn't necessarily need to be. I think it is religious because of that feeling, not necessarily because we consider it religious. But it's something that evokes a kind of respect for it. It comes from the Latin sacra, which means consecrated or dedicated. So it's something that's been set apart from our ordinary state, our ordinary involvement with things, to acknowledge that this is something special. And it's special because of what, That's the question to ask. What's geometry? Well, that comes from the Greek geo, meaning earth, and metron, which is measurement. So it's a practice of having to measure the earth for various reasons. And so, I'm going to skip past these pretty quickly because they're really going to take up time if I go into them in detail. But it's been known for a long time that, you know, the supreme geometer is whatever created this reality around us. We know that it's highly organized, highly ordered, highly harmonious. So, you know, Swedenborg tells us that there is a loving God who is wise and powerful, loving, wise and powerful, and who with the power that God has of his own nature and his own being, has created this entire existence and us in it. And so it's not surprising that if God's quality is one of a love for order and a love for beauty, which is often the feeling that we get from looking at order, it has a feeling, it invokes a feeling in us. And that's what beauty to us is. You know, we see a form, we admire it, something opens up in us, and we have a feeling that goes with that. And that's the recognition of beauty, something that makes us feel good, something that makes us feel pleasant, makes us feel reverent. So there's lots of things that are considered sacred. They're usually made by people, either objects of worship of some kind, maybe in various religions, or buildings that have been set aside for the purpose of pondering the spiritual life, the inner life that we have. There are certain symbols that have become regarded as sacred symbols. Then we have nature itself and its forms, because nature is God's toolkit, is what I like to say. That you know, God has expressed his own qualities through nature and has put in place something that's orderly, harmonious, and has a unity of purpose, even though it's lots of different parts, just like we are all different, but we work towards a common goal. And so that's what makes it beautiful. And there's lots of geometrical expressions in nature. There's lots to say about this, but I won't turn it into a mathematical session. But there, you can just see that this sunflower or this flower center has some kind of integrity about it. It's got a harmony about it. It's got a beautiful expression there, right? And you see that in so many things. We're surrounded by it. And the interesting thing is that everything from the microscopic to the macroscopic is involved in order, you know. And when we discover things we learn things about the natural world in all its detail, we often find that underlying it, there is a kind of order. At first it might appear chaotic when they find just snippets of this, and it seems to be unrelated or not to have an integrity about it. But the more we look into it and the more complete the picture becomes, the more we see that these are all manifestations of order with variations. Every element has its own behavior, and yet there is a family of behaviors, you know. All the ones on the left, they're people loving. The ones on the right are people hating. or rather, I shouldn't say people hating, but they're more sort of independent. And the ones in the pink column on the far right, they're so independent that they don't care for, you know, it's almost like they've got Asperger's. They're in a world of their own, you know, and they're happy in that world. So there's not a criticism or a judgment of the good or bad qualities that it manifests, but that variety is really interesting. Whereas the middle part of this periodic table of elements, they're mostly metals, and they have an ability to keep both the front and the back door open, so that there's a constant thoroughfare. It's like a public, you know, visiting place, or like a cafe. The people are coming in and out all the time, and that's what makes that useful in terms of connecting, right? Whereas the ones on the right-hand side in the pink column, they're not connectors, but they have an integrity of their own self and their own nature and their own qualities, which, you know, all of those things are such important spiritual elements in our awareness. So don't let it be said that this is all just natural stuff and we should throw all that out in order to pursue a spiritual understanding. because that's not how it works. I'm going to skip past all this, but it's just another manifestation of the orderliness of the very subatomic world itself. This relates to music, because musical expressions are all made up of vibrations, and those vibrations are all combinations of beautiful circular forms that are expressed over time, which makes them sine waves if they're pure. And when you mix them together, those sine waves are brought together to express all the varieties of musical sounds and sounds in the world that we're familiar with. So you can close your eyes and sit in front of an orchestra, and if you've got a little bit of experience, you can say, well, that's the violins playing, even though I can't see who it is. Or that's the harp playing, and that's this playing. That's, you know, you can name the instruments. How is that possible? Because each combination is like a fingerprint for that particular unique set of qualities that instrument expresses. And so it's the same at the subatomic level, that these are the orbitals of the various atoms that make up the periodic table as it's expressed today. And they're all just different domains in which the electrons, which are the outer behavioral component of every element in the world, that behavioral component has certain limits in where it lives, where it's likely to be, where you're likely to find it, right? These are its cafes and its favorite places. And so they are very harmoniously expressed. And so these are called by the physicists spherical harmonics.
Okay.
Visual representations of the first few spherical harmonics in the subatomic structure of atoms. The blue portions represent regions where the function is positive, and the yellow portions represent where it's negative. So there's even a polarity there. Like Swedenborg teaches us that every correspondence, which is a spiritual component that sits behind natural functions and forms in nature, because God designed nature, it has a layer of instruction within it, which we can dismiss if we want, or ignore, which most people do. But once we take an interest in it, we learn that there are two ways of looking at it. One is a positive interpretation, the other one is its opposite. So very much our instruction depends on these opposites, just in the same way that the atomic world is set up with an integrity that's based on opposites. So there's a lot of lessons there. So here's another chart of the periodic table with those orbitals. Yeah. And here's another version of it, but I don't want to make it too long a session for another time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip past a couple of slides here. All right, here we have a musical example. What I was referring to earlier, that the cleanest, most pure expression of a sound is a sine wave, which is basically a curve. It's, in a way, you could say that it's the circle that's been mapped across time. So when you start adding circles of different dimensions together, like you can have short waves, which are circles that rotate very quickly, or you can have very large waves, which are circles that travel very slowly. If you put them together, you end up getting a mixture of a signal. And if you put all these different colors together, you end up with the green wave, which is the resulting phenomenon. That's what we experience is that result. But somehow we are built by God with the capacity through the inner ear, the cochlea, and the brain structure and the brain functions that allows us to decode this, to say, well, that's a this and that's a that, and this is made up of. We do what's called a Fourier analysis of this whole symbol, this whole signal, and turn it into its parts. It's pretty much amazing.
So just to clarify, so you've got what is termed here the fundamental, which is the basic. That's the basic frequency, isn't it? That might be the note that you hear. And then all of these other parts, what have they got here? Says Rizar, sorry, my symbols are covering it all. So these other harmonics that are in here are what give the sound its quality. Would that be right, Joe?
Yes, that's right.
That's what distinguishes, say, a clarinet from a violin in the analogy you were talking about before.
That's right. So it's like saying that every note, a single note on any instrument, is not just a single sine wave and not just a pure sound in itself. It's actually a whole symphony of sounds, and that symphony of sounds it relates all of the components that these different little parts are playing. They relate to each other. And there is the boss of the whole thing is what we usually name the note by, which is called the fundamental. But everything else is usually whole number multiples. Get this is a mathematical realization by musicians and physicists, that the other components of that sound are whole number multiples of that fundamental frequency. So you can multiply it by 2 and then you get a half, twice the speed, or multiply it by 3, you get 3 times the speed of that boss underlying fundamental frequency. And so it's the combination of those higher things and how much they manifest or are suppressed that gives a particular instrument its fingerprint. That's what makes it unique. That's an intriguing study, and it's a very wonderful world to explore if you're interested in it. So here's another type of manifestation of it is in the solar system, for example. It's not just things rotating around and around and around on a disk. We're actually moving forward in space. So in a way, you could say that's your map across time, the time domain on the x-axis across the screen. And you've got all these vibrations going on by the planets going around the sun. So some of them go very slowly, like the outer planets. Some of the ones that are inward go very quickly. So you could almost say that they are musically expressing themselves in relation to each other. And there are people who've played with this, like Kepler and, famous astronomers usually, sometimes mathematicians. So here's another similar sort of idea, but expressed differently by a 13th century Persian astronomer and mathematician called Al-Tusi. He was a Sufi. So an Islamic mystic, if you like. And yet he was interested in all this sort of stuff. So he said, what if you get a rotating sphere and you put a point on it and you relate it to the center, and then seeing what happens to that as they both roll around. It's fascinating. And somebody even invented a whole little game that we used to play called Spirograph. I don't know if you remember.
I've got one at home still.
Right? So where you've got wheels within wheels, and each wheel gives you a different result, and that's the beginning of geometry, of harmoniously expressed artistic geometry. You can also do it without the wheels by putting a whole lot of dots around a circle and just joining them in various ways. There's also a thing called a cycloid drawing machine, which someone invented, which is similar. It's like all these cogs and wheels, and a different size wheel will give you a different size result, and the way that you relate them together will give you different results, and so on. Right? It's endlessly fascinating, and kids love it, even if they know nothing about it. These look like they've got numbers of the number of teeth that each has, as a number of cogs that each one of them has, 74, 72, and so on. So these all create ratios or relationships between one reality and another. And that's really what interests me in music and geometry. because it's the study of relationships between things. Each one of them expresses a certain truth or a certain quality of itself, and the way that they relate together is what makes that whole much more interesting and relates them together. There's another thing called the Lissajous curves. I don't know how many of you watch the ABC, but one of them is the ABC logo.
Oh, yes,
you can spot it. Your
left-hand side, third one down.
Yeah, there's always two on this because it's an intersection graph. So in a way, it mirrors it across the diagonal, right? You'll find that it's expressed in two ways as a mirror. That in itself is a kind of geometry feature, mirroring and symmetry. That's another thing that makes it beautiful. So an oscilloscope is a device that can help you to show these kind of curves. There's another device called a sand pendulum, which does similar sort of things. Maybe some of you have one or have seen them. They're fascinating to watch and play with, even if you know nothing about the geometry or the mathematics of it. If you don't use one of them, you'll end up like Jackson Pollock, just doing whatever. That's interesting in itself because there's freedom in it, but it doesn't give you quite the same result, does it?
No.
It's like it leaves a different impression altogether than the order that you see in nature. Even though chaos can in itself be an interesting study of a kind of order that's so complex that we don't understand it. So these are Tusi couples. So Tusi couples, Al-Tusi proposed this structure where you can hinge a large lever that floats around, that turns around the center and draws a circle, if you like. But on the end of that, you can hinge a somewhat smaller lever, which has its own rotational speed. And then on that, you can put another lever. On the end of that, you can put another lever. And so it becomes complex very quickly. But it has its use. And that use is actually described in this little video, which I thought, if we have time, we could show it. It's only 3 minutes.
Now, do you want me to show it from my side, or are you going to show it from yours?
It'd be good because I think I'm going to come unstuck if I do it.
That's fine. Do you want me to get it going?
Yeah, so this is just a demonstration of how Tusi coupling is used and the complexity of it, how that can be useful in defining the finer features of more complex shapes.
Here we go.
What up? Today we're going to talk about waves. This is a circle. You probably knew that. If we were to turn this circle on and watch it go up and down and trace that motion out, you get what's called a sine wave, which you know to be important in things like pendulum motion, particle physics, things of that nature. Sine waves are important. But for my money, the coolest thing about them is you can add them together to do other things. There's some fancy math I learned at the university called the Fourier series. These are my old notebooks. And check this out. The teacher challenged us to create this graph by doing nothing but adding together curves. And to demonstrate that, I created this. I had to get a tripod. Here's my flip book. So it starts with one sine wave, and then we add another one. And you can see the more waves you add together, the closer the function gets to what you're supposed to make. Because you can see like that and that look very similar. That's 50 waves added together. So I'm in Georgia Tech. This is Doha.
Hello.
You have visualized via animation a Fourier series in the most beautiful way I've ever seen in my life. All Doha is doing is he's taking these sine waves that we explained earlier and he's stacking one on another sine wave. He's stacking the circles to add together these waves to create a Fourier series. These visualization techniques that Doha developed worked on any version of any function. For example, on a sawtooth wave, you can see at n=8 how the Fourier series starts to play out. It looks really cool. I'm challenging him to draw this with the Fourier series. It is that Smarter Everyday thing that you see all over the internet. I totally am geeking out right now. I love this. It's a hard image to draw using math. It's got like curves, right? It's got little sharp points and switchbacks. The first thing that he has to do in order to draw this image is to extract the X and Y positions that he would need to make functions for in order to make this thing work. He then needs to create a Fourier series for each one of those functions so that he can add them together. And as you can see, these first few were not winners. I mean, like, no stretch of the imagination could make your brain think this looks like the side profile of a human head. Everything's a bit derpy. But as he starts to refine it and he adds more and more waves to the functions, things start to hone in and it starts to look really good. At about 40 circles in this whole function, things start to look really good, and your brain would totally think that you're looking at a drawn image instead of a mathematically drawn function.
If you look closer at just one of these arms, you would think that it's chaos, but it's not. It's complete order backed up by a mathematical function. In fact, this is why I love math. It's the language that describes the entire physical world. We can approximate anything as long as you have enough terms.
This is the beauty of the Fourier series. You take simple things you understand, like oscillators, sine waves, circles, and you can add them together to do something much more complex. And if you think about it, that's all of science and technology. You take these simple things and you build upon them, and you can make a complex system that can do incredible things. A simple thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, there's a lot, doesn't it? Simple things can be combined to make things that are very complex and very powerful. So I get a feeling that God works like that. There is a lot of simplicity in the subatomic world of just a set of components that might only be 40 or 36 or something bits and pieces, but out of that come all the variety of behaviors, all the variety of interactions, all the power of things that we see in the world and can make use of. I find that quite an incredible realization. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested in all that stuff, including mathematics. So just very quickly, I want to go through the fact that this tradition of doing geometry, which is sacred Islamic geometry really, but we do it using only two tools. One is a straight edge. It's not even a ruler because it doesn't have any measurements on it. It's not necessary. The straight edge connects 2 points in the straightest possible way, in the shortest possible way. So that is my device for exploring truths. A compass, on the other hand, is a thing that is anchored in the center, so it has an integrity coming out from the center. Everything relates to the center, whereas a straight edge relates 2 points together, but the compass relates things back to the center. And there is this, and then you draw a circle around that center. So a compass is an interesting instrument. In the old days, they used to have compasses which have a circular part, a sort of spherical part at the top, right? And that represented God, on which all things depend. So that's kind of the part where the source of your construction is. And so you've got a fixed arm that's connected to that, which is determined by the top. So God determines where creation is centered in this world, right? It's God's direct creation. Well, what does that make the other arm then? It's adjustable. It's adjustable in relation to that fixed arm that's controlled by God. Of course, at the bottom, you've got this sort of presence in the physical world, but it's not really present because it's a very sharp point. So in actual fact, it has no presence spatially. It just has a presence in terms of it's something else that's here, but it isn't. And I find that the spiritual is a bit like that. It's present in the world of ultimates, and yet it's not really present in its fullness of where it comes from. Yeah. Then you've got the adjustable arm is the degree of our alignment with God's love, plan, and action. So if the fixed arm is God in manifestation, with all the things that He designs, both what is given and what is possible with it, those possibilities are attended to based on our response to it. You know, how do we engage with that? Are we interested in it? Do we learn about how it works and how it works best, and so on? So the adjustable arm was considered to be the degree of our responsiveness to God's expression of what's been created for us. So I find that philosophical basis very, very wonderful. So traditional geometric constructors only use those two tools, and I won't bore you with the details, but you know, obviously compasses draw circles and so on. They replicate distances, so they're a tool for replication, reproducing, multiplying. Straight edge is a tool for drawing straight lines. Yep. So, okay, so we've got, let's just explore a couple of these notions here quickly. If maybe I should skip a few, but order is when things are arranged in a neat, clear, and organized way. When things are in order, they work better and help us reach an intended purpose or a goal more easily. And that goes for God as well as for us. Providence. Swedenborg says that what people call coincidence, chance, or fortune is actually the operation of divine providence in the least aspect of life, in everything. There is no true coincidence or chance. All things, even apparent accidents, are providential. Events are manifestations of divine order or permitted disorder, influenced by spiritual conditions. Usefulness is another big key player in Swedenborg's language. He teaches that use or usefulness is the central purpose and organizing principle of all creation. Everything exists to serve a purpose, and love and wisdom become real through use, that is, doing good in meaningful ways. Use is love and wisdom in action. It's the purpose of life, the path to joy, and the way to connect with God and with each other. Probably skip this one because I think I've just covered that.
It's very tied with use, isn't it? Purpose, I think.
Very much so. You know, use has a certain thing in mind, right? It's not use unless it's got something that it drives towards. So maybe that would cover purpose. It is the intended planned goal that we're striving for. Swedenborg says that the purpose of creation is to bring forth a communal heaven from the human race so that people can be in loving union with God. All things, from the biggest to the smallest parts of all of creation, serve this goal by helping us receive and express divine love and wisdom through useful things. And, you know, there's plenty of places you can look that up in Swedenborg. Pattern is another big one in geometry. So what is a pattern? A pattern is a form of order in which something repeats in a regular or predictable way. It can apply to shapes, colors, numbers, sounds, or actions, as in music, for example. Patterns help us to see order in things and makes it easier to predict what comes next. So it has a very useful and comforting aspect to it. What about beauty? Beauty is the quality of something that makes us feel pleasure or admiration or joy when we see, hear, or experience it. It can be found in people, nature, art, ideas, even actions, and what is considered beautiful can be different for each person or culture. Swedenborg says that divine love and wisdom are expressed in beauty. What about harmony? Different parts working well together to create a pleasing or balanced whole. So this is very important, this word whole, because what is holy is related to those words, what is whole, W-H-O-L-E, or what is healthy. Health is also related to the same root word. So health, whole, and unity are all kind of related, and sacred. They're all related words. Symmetry is when something looks the same after a certain change, like flipping it, turning it, sliding it, and so on. It shows balance and harmony in shapes, patterns, and objects. Like here are some examples. Things can be reflected in a mirror, they can be, or turned over, if you like. They can be rotated around the center point. They can be translated and repeated without doing anything else to it, or they can be reflected in a gliding pattern. So yeah, I'm just going to skip through a whole lot of stuff that I was not covered, but I'll show you just a couple of quick final slides of these are my paintings.
Oh, lovely.
Geometric drawings. So this is what I do, and these are the results. And we should finish there, I guess, because there's a lot more to be said about the process and how it all unfolds and all that. But I think I've pretty much covered the principles of it.
Yeah.
So you start with a small and you replicate it. You know, you're just basically symmetrically mirroring it and duplicating it. And you end up with these more complex patterns.
They're lovely, Joe. Yeah,
So
that's great.
Yeah.
Look, thanks so much for your time. What I will say to anybody who's been watching, if you've got any thoughts, reflections, questions, and you want to pop them down I can pass them on to Joe, you know, after the event. And I'm sure, Joe, you're happy to get on YouTube and Facebook and answer any questions you've got, or we can pass them across. That's fine. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us. That's been great. It's been lovely to have you here. I will ask Rob, have you got when Joe's talking about sacred geometry, is there a planned date for that yet, or is that to be advertised?
Nothing planned as yet, no, but I'll let you know.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. Yep. We'll pop information down on, you know, underneath this video for anybody who's interested in attending that. I presume it'll be in Sydney. Yeah.
It will, but yes, online as well.
Good excuse for a holiday.
Yeah, we'll
That's right, exactly.
We'll always put any events on the website, swedenborg.com.au. So have a look there for all our events. You can join them with click on a Zoom link and you're in.
Wonderful.
So it's pretty easy to do.
Thanks, Joe.
And that's where all the latest and greatest info about events will always be.
Wonderful. And what I'm going to do is just advertise a couple of events that we've got coming up. So I've got my next one is a chat with Martin Pennington in a week's time, just an hour earlier than today's was. We're continuing looking at John, Gospel of John. We're in chapter 15 next week. And then in a month's time, we have Julian Duckworth coming along, and he'll be having a chat here. So got a couple of other messages have just come through from Rowan's in Melbourne. Hi, Rowan. It's after a copy of the slides. There you go. I'm sure we can pass those along.
Okay. No worries.
Wayne in the UK again, just saying thanks. So look, yeah, thanks everybody
Wayne.
for being with us. Thanks again, Joe. It's been great to hear from you and hear about the work of the centre, and look forward to connecting with you all again sometime soon.
Well, likewise, thank you for doing what you do, David. I enjoy these interactions very much because we're a community after all.
Indeed.
And all our individual parts makes the whole work.
Indeed, and across the globe, there's so much going on. It's good to see. All right, thanks so much.
Definitely. Great.
See you then.
Thanks,
Bye.
David.